Hi, this is Dr. Hart again. It's been a while, and so it's time to record a new video on Nevada state government. We had an election quite recently, and the results of that election should be reflected. It's high time to do so. So Nevada uses separation of powers. There are three branches of governments, just as what you find in every state government, and just as what you will find in the national government, legislative, executive, and judicial branches. Nevada's legislature is bicameral, as is true for every state in the union except for Nebraska. And crucially, Nevada has a plural executive. This is the result of progressive era reforms, which took place late in the 19th and early in the 20th century, to weaken the power of government and specifically to weaken the power of the political executive. And Nevada has three tiers or levels of state judiciary. Now, the executive branch has 6 independently elected members of the plural executive, and it is the fact of them being independently elected by the voters that makes this executive a plural one. The governor is the chief executive, but besides the governor, there are 5 members of independently elected plural executive. And these elected offices are lieutenant governor, attorney general, secretary of state, treasurer, and controller. Governor is Joe Lombardo. He was elected in a close fight in November of 2022 against Steve Sisolak, who became rather unpopular because of the shutdowns connected to COVID-19. A number of voters believed the shutdowns were too long, too protracted, too brutal, and so Steve Sisolak was denied re-election in 2022. Joe Lombardo was elected and ascended to governorship in January of 2023. Now, Joe Lombardo, you can pause the video anytime to read the details of his biography. I would like to note that he is a public employee through and through. I mean, his career has been very long and very storied and spanned several decades being involved in military, civilian, paramilitary organizations of government. So this is someone who comes into the job with a very deep understanding, professional and personal understanding of what it is to work in the public sector. Line of gubernatorial succession is defined by Article 5 of the Nevada Constitution. So should something terrible happen to governor, lieutenant governor would ascend to his position. Governor is the chief executive. Being the chief executive is the main source of his power. In this capacity, he appoints 80 heads and deputy heads of departments and the members of boards, commissions, and committees. Boards and commissions are 2 different terms, but they're used interchangeably in the context of Nevada state government. The governor himself is a member of several boards and commissions. Now, some of the key appointments that he makes: heads of the Department of Motor Vehicles, the Department of Public Safety, Human Resources, and Employment Security. The governor does not need legislative approval to make these appointments. This is a crucial point to note. So when it comes to appointing key leaders of the bureaucratic apparatus, he can act like a dictator. There's no need to ask the legislature for approval. The legislature is out of the picture. This allows the governor to have indirect control over the levers of power of professional bureaucracy, the fact that he appoints top people to those bureaucratic positions. Now, Nevada governor does not have the sole power to issue pardons. This is an interesting point to mention. He is a member of a 9-member board of pardons. He can veto any pardon, but he alone cannot grant a pardon. And this is in contrast to what you find in the vast majority of states in the United States, where the governor has the sole power to grant pardons. Now, I would say that this is an interesting feature of Nevada state government, but as far as gubernatorial power in general is concerned, this should almost be treated as a footnote, because the lack of power to grant pardons is not a major drag on the overall picture of how powerful the governor really is. Additional chief executive powers of Nevada governor: he can appoint officials to serve in summer offices whenever there's a vacancy. He can suspend a fine or forfeiture and grant a reprieve of up to 60 days from the time of judgment. He serves on the board of state prison commissioners, which oversees the state prison system. And he serves on the board of examiners, which oversees all claims against the state for money or other property. Governor is the chief of state. This is a ceremonial and symbolic, but an important function. The governor serves as the state's goodwill ambassador, attending various state functions and representing the state to the world outside of Nevada. And in this role, the governor will meet with the president and other governors, and will also, do ribbon cutting and opening new casinos and groundbreaking ceremonies of various kinds. The governor is the chief legislator. So the Constitution of Nevada requires governor to give the state of the state address, where he outlines his main budgetary and legislative priorities for the coming 2 years, because we are in the 2-year cycle. The legislature meets only once every 2 years in Nevada. And the governor has a lot of clout over the budget, and this is one of his main sources of power, if not the main source of power. Nevada uses the central system of the central clearinghouse system, which means that all budgetary requests by agencies must first go to the governor before they go to the state legislature. An agency head can request any budget from the governor, but is usually not in a position to later ask the legislature for more than the governor recommends. The governor's budget is usually adopted with only a few modifications by the legislature. So the governor is not quite a dictator when it comes to the budget, but close. And it should be said, in praise of Joe Lombardo, that during his first year as governor, he's been working well with the legislature, which is controlled entirely by the opposition party. In fact, in the assembly, Democrats have supermajority, a 2/3 supermajority, and in the Senate, they're only one vote shy of 2/3 supermajority. And yet, he was able to work with Democrats in a professional way, where negotiations centered around specific figures and specific issues. Very different from the style of, say, President Trump in his working with Congress, or even Governor DeSantis of Florida with his participation in the culture war. Nevada's Governor Lombardo doesn't participate in culture wars. He's very much like a typical professional administrator, and governs like an administrator, where negotiations for specific issues is what drives his agenda, as opposed to symbolic, rhetorical, and cultural issues. The governor has veto power. All bills passed by both houses of the state legislature in the same form. They have to be passed in the same form. They go to governor, and then he can veto or sign. So historically, about 12% of all gubernatorial vetoes in Nevada have been overridden, which is much greater than the national average of 1%. So this is probably due to the fact that the vast majority of legislators in Nevada come from Clark County, because Clark County has over 75% of all people, and so roughly 75% of all legislators. And Clark County, for many decades now, tended to be Democratic and to vote heavily for Democratic representatives in the state assembly and state senate. And governors have often been Republican and have been connected in many respects to northern interests, particularly mining interests and other interests of the northern part of the state. And so this conflict has led to a significant number of vetoes being overridden. But if you look at 1% national average, this tells you just how powerful the position of the governor is in the system of America's state governments. It's almost impossible to override a gubernatorial veto in the vast majority of states. Now, Lieutenant Governor Stavros Anthony is also a Republican, won his first term in 2022, and he also has a very long and distinguished career in the public service. You can pause the video at any time to find out more about the details of Lieutenant Governor Stavros Anthony's career. 9 out of 36 times, the lieutenant governor and governor belonged to different parties. And I have to point out that this is not the case now, because now Governor Lombardo and Lieutenant Governor Anthony, they both belong to the same party, to the Republican Party. Now, whenever you do have relatively rare events when governor and lieutenant governor belong to different political parties, under Article 5 of Nevada Constitution, the lieutenant governor becomes acting governor, not only in case of vacancy, but also in case of governor's absence from the state for any reason. Nevada Supreme Court interpreted this to mean that there must be some critical need in order for lieutenant governor to act. In other words, if governor is out of state, as opposed to being dead or incapacitated, lieutenant governor does not act as governor. He just acts as a caretaker, as a placeholder. The position of lieutenant governor chair is important because lieutenant governor chairs two commissions in Nevada, economic development and tourism, and both of those are crucially important to the politics of Nevada. Lieutenant governor can also serve as an advisor to governor. Attorney General. After governor, the position of the Attorney General is the most visible one. And Attorney General is the chief legal advisor to the state. He or she serves as the board on the Board of Prison Commissioners, Board of Examiners, and Board of State Pardon Commissioners. So it's a busy job. Attorney General defends the state or prosecutes on behalf of the state in the Nevada State Supreme Court and the Supreme Court of the United States. Nevada Attorney General is Aaron Ford. Ford was elected in November of 2018, re-elected in November of 2022. Secretary of State. This is the official who is a custodian of the state's records. So you can think of this position like a chief clerk for the state. Also, Secretary of State, along with governor, must sign all state grants and commissions. He serves on the Board of Prison Commissioners and the Board of Examiners. By state law, Secretary of State commissions notaries public in Nevada. Secretary of State prepares official election ballots, publishes official election results, and issues certificates of election to the winners. So, how do you know when an election in Nevada is over? When Nevada Secretary of State says so. And this is true of other states in the United States. So what makes an election officially over as far as the jurisdiction of any given state is concerned? And the answer is when the Secretary of State certifies that election. The current Secretary of State is Francisco Aguilar, who simply often goes by Cisco Aguilar. And you can pause the video now to read the details of his career. Is a Democrat, right? And Andy Matthews is a Republican. So what does the controller do? Issues warrants to the treasurer to pay up, serves as the state chief bookkeeper, making an annual report of state expenditures. Where did the money go? So we want to keep close tabs to prevent corruption. We want to keep tabs on how money is being spent. And now that we have reviewed all 6 positions, we see a very interesting partisan breakdown. As a result of the most recent election, 3 members of the Plural Executive are Republican and 3 Democrat, which is more or less in line with Nevada being a battleground or a purple state, split between Republicans and Democrats, even though there are more registered Democrats. It's not a state, at least not yet, that has gone blue. It is true that in all recent elections, starting in 2008, the Democratic candidate for president won. Obama by very large margins, 13 and 6.5%. And then Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden by much smaller margins, between 2 and 4%. But what we do see here is, as a state, as voter sentiment is concerned, Nevada is still a purple or battleground state. And part of probably the biggest reason why Republicans are struggling in Nevada sometimes is because the Republican Party is not particularly well organized and not particularly well focused. But as elections of Governor Lombardo and Lieutenant Governor Anthony demonstrate, Republicans do have strength in the state. So this is Nevada's Plural Executive. Thank you.